Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the New South Wales Tender Round 8 webinar. And for those that joined the Tender 9 webinar yesterday, welcome back. My name is Jack Kratzad, and I'm from the Corporate Affairs team here at ASL. And I'm joined by my colleagues Timo Muller, Nikki Nicholson, Ross Anderson, Lachlan White, Josh Johnson, and James Hyatt. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians on whose lands we are all on. I pay my respects to their elders past and present and extend my respects to any First Nations people here with us today. I'm speaking to you today from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. Before we get into the substance of the presentation, just a few housekeeping matters to go over. First, everyone's camera and microphone will be off, and the Q&A function is also disabled as we're using Slido to take questions today. So you can access Slido through the QR code that is shown on the slides. If you have any issues with this access, please email your questions to engagement@asl.org.au. For the Q&A session today, we often receive quite technical or project-specific questions that we can't answer appropriately without further information or due consideration. So our ask is that these type of questions are put through the formal tender Q&A process instead, which is currently running and registered proponents have access to. If we do get questions of this nature, we'll bookmark them for the Q&A process and answer through that format instead. So we'll take them on notice. We do also have some of our team moderating Slido in the back end. They'll be grouping together questions of the same nature to streamline the Q&A and ensure we can get through a good variety of questions. Naturally, there's always a chance we won't be able to get through every single question asked. However, following all of our webinars, we always take all the questions received and we publish written responses to them on our website, and we will do that for this session as well. So a bit about ASL, for those of you who aren't familiar with us. ASL is an independent for-purpose service provider established to support the delivery of energy commitments made by governments that will transform Australia's energy system. We were established around 4 years ago with our foundational role as the New South Wales Consumer Trustee, where our work is focused on securing investment in new energy infrastructure that delivers positive energy system, consumer, and community outcomes. From this foundational role, we've expanded to also provide tender delivery services for the Australian Government's Capacity Investment Scheme and support the South Australian Government's Firm Energy Reliability Mechanism Scheme as the scheme administrator. More recently, we've been engaged to support the Australian Government to undertake preparatory work for the establishment of the Electricity Services Entry Mechanism, one of the key recommendations coming out of last year's NEM review. Through this, we're acting as joint convener of the industry-led contract co-design process and supporting the early implementation work ahead of the next ECMC meeting. So the purpose of today's webinar is really to give you a strong foundation that will be able to support you in preparing a high-quality bid for Tender Round 8. The team will cover the key information on timelines and process, the two products available in this tender round and how they work, that is the generation LTESA and the new hybrid generation LTESA, and they'll provide an overview of our assessment framework and some key items to consider when preparing your bid. Importantly, we'll also cover some recent changes made to how we assess social value. And as I just mentioned at the end of the presentation, the team you see on screen will be on hand to answer any questions you may have. So thank you, and I'll now hand over to Timo Muller to get us started.
Thank you, Jack, and good morning, everyone. Tender Round 8 is the biggest New South Wales ever generation infrastructure tender, and the first generation tender under the New South Wales Roadmap after or since Tender Round 4. New South Wales generation tenders are resuming as the New South Wales generation target under the Capacity Investment Scheme has been met with the recent announcement of the CIS Tender 7 winners. ASL's 2025 IAO report sets an ambitious development pathway for New South Wales, a stretch target of 16 gigawatts of new generation by 2030. We still have some way to go to achieve this target, and for this tender round, we have set an indicative target of 2.5 gigawatts or 7,000 gigawatt hours of eligible generation infrastructure, and we have the same target for another tender that we are launching towards the end of this year. So this makes it 5 gigawatts in total over these two tender rounds, which is then approximately or a bit less than a third of the overall ambitious target. ASL is acting in this tender as the consumer trustee, so our independent board is the final decision maker. And our board has the flexibility to award significantly more or less than the indicative target, depending on the quality and financial value to New South Wales electricity consumers of the bids we receive. So in this tender, we are looking for projects that have a credible pathway to achieving commercial operation state. We're looking for competitive bids. We're looking for bids that deliver value for money to New South Wales electricity consumers. So that's one of the key considerations. And projects need to demonstrate that they can create social value for the communities that host their projects. And this includes projects that provide like strong or like have a high impact on wholesale electricity cost for consumers, and can also provide some contributions to the system security. And we expect competitively priced wind and hybrid projects will be able to demonstrate these benefits. Tender Round 8 also launches the new hybrid generation LTESA, which is a variant of the generation LTESA and specifically designed for hybrid projects. And when we looked at the New South Wales pipeline of projects, there's a huge potential for hybrid projects, and with that LTESA, hybrid LTESA, we want to target those that haven't achieved FID yet. I'll now pass on to Ross Anderson, who will talk you through the LTESA products we have on offer for this round. Thank you.
Thanks, Timo, and good morning all. So the purpose of this section is to provide an introduction to the LTESA products and some of the key features to help you understand how they can support your project. So as Timo mentioned, we are offering two LTESAs for this round, the Generation LTESA and the new Hybrid Generation LTESA. By offering both of these products for Tender Round 8, we're really aiming to maximise the flexibility that you have in structuring your projects in a way that best aligns with your needs. Despite some differences in their terms, the core design principles of both products are the same. The LTESAs provide support to generators during low price scenarios in return for some upside sharing with consumers in high price scenarios, narrowing the range of uncertainty over revenues and improving project bankability. And flexibility remains at the core of LTESA design. Operators can make decisions around exercising their option or contracting in the market for some or all of their capacity. Now, given we've got two products, we thought it was worth spending a bit of time covering off on some of the key terminology in the tender guidelines and the various bidding options available for Tender Round 8. Firstly, you may have seen that the tender guidelines refer to the terms assessed and non-assessed hybrid projects. Only the generation component is assessed against the merit criteria for non-assessed hybrid projects, and accordingly, the LTESA allows, but does not contractually require, the delivery of the associated project. In comparison, for assessed hybrid projects, both the generation and the storage component are assessed against the merit criteria and are contractually required to be delivered. So now taking those terms and referring back to the two products on offer, The generation LTESA covers all eligible generation infrastructure or the generation component of hybrid projects. Generation only, non-assessed, and assessed hybrid projects can all bid for a generation LTESA in this round. In comparison, the hybrid generation LTESA applies only to projects that are bidding as an assessed hybrid project and also meet some additional considerations. These additional considerations include that the export capacity of the generation project must be greater than the export capacity of the storage project, and the storage project must have a minimum of 4 hours of duration at COD. At a particular point, I did want to call out, following our industry consultation on the design of the hybrid LTESA earlier this year. So we have adjusted the design of the product so that both AC and DC coupled hybrids can be accommodated now in the hybrid generation LTESA. We do, however, require that the project has a single point of connection and that the project is registered so that it can conform to dispatch instructions in an aggregate manner. And just reiterating that that applies just to the hybrid generation LTESA. Now, I'd like to focus on some of the common terms of both the generation and hybrid generation LTESAs. For this tender round, both products are comprised of 1-year option periods, providing increased flexibility to operators in choosing to exercise or contract with the market. By settling monthly, the LTESA supports operators in managing cash flow risks during low price periods. Furthermore, operators can sculpt the LTESA support they receive over time to align with their contracting and operating model. We've provided flexibility to nominate excluded periods and a contracted percentage in your bids, as well as adjusting through the contract term by not exercising an option, fully exercising an option, or nominating to exercise your option for a portion of your project's output. Now, whilst some core features are the same between these products, there are some differences between the two. Whilst the generation LTESA settles on sent-out generation, the hybrid generation LTESA is settled based on net exports at the connection point, and the settlement calculation includes a 50% price risk sharing component, accounting for the ability of operators to shape their output. Settlement for the generation LTESA includes a fixed price term, which is due to the fact that the settlement mechanism as a swap essentially fixes the price that operators receive for their sent-out generation. However, because of the price risk sharing component in the hybrid generation LTESA, the settlement does not result in operators obtaining a fixed price for their sent-out net exports, and hence the term strike price is used. Another difference between the two products is the treatment of negative price intervals. In the generation LTESA, the floating price is set to 0 for negative price intervals, effectively acting as a price floor. In contrast, the notional quantity or the volume of the swap is set to 0 for both imports and exports during negative intervals in the hybrid generation LTESA. And this is designed to ensure that hybrid projects maintain price responsive behaviours. Whilst the primary performance obligation in the generation LTESA is a minimum generation volume, reflecting the nature of the assets, the hybrid generation LTESA also includes obligations that apply to the storage component. And finally, in comparison to the generation LTESA, the hybrid generation LTESA also includes additional requirements with regards to eligible offtake contracts, reflecting the broader range of contracts that a hybrid may enter into. Now, when bidding for an LTESA, it is expected that proponents consider the level of revenue support required to ensure their project is commercially viable and can be delivered. Proponents are expected to aim to offer the most competitive bid variables that reflect the project's financing and delivery requirements, but still provide sufficient value to the project. To help to support you in doing this, there are a range of options available in submitting default and alternative bids under MC1. In particular, we want to draw your attention to the option of submitting a default bid as an assessed hybrid for a generation LTESA and an alternative bid for a hybrid generation LTESA. Proponents should also note the options to provide a schedule of fixed or striked prices as appropriate in alternative bids, as well as variable contract terms and excluded periods. We wish to stress that in the case of default and alternative bids, both of the bids are assessed against the same merit criteria. Thank you all very much for your time this morning, and I'll pass on to Nikki to provide an overview of the tender assessment process.
Thanks very much, Ross. So, as flagged in our market briefing note, a single stage process will be implemented for tender round 8. This new approach consolidates the evaluation of eligibility, financial and non-financial value criteria into one comprehensive bid stage. This has been designed to reduce the tender duration so that successful projects can be awarded an LTESA sooner, and it also simplifies the submission requirements and means there is a longer window for you to prepare your bid. We will assess bids against the eligibility criteria and merit criteria as outlined in the tender guidelines, so I do recommend that you have a look at those closely. Under the new model, we've simplified assessment from 8 merit criteria to 4 merit criteria, as shown on the slide. So what are we looking for? Ultimately, we're looking for the delivery of high quality projects that perform well across all the merit criteria, regardless of their weighting. And as I said before, I would recommend referring to the tender guidelines for the full details of the merit criteria. But in summary, MC1 will assess a project's ability to reduce wholesale electricity market costs, the expected LTESA costs, the project system strength contribution, and the expected system security benefits. The projects are assessed against various potential scenarios to determine what value they will provide to New South Wales electricity consumers. MC1 is a critical element of the bid assessment and it carries a weighting of 49%. Now, MC2 looks at the project's pathway and progress towards reaching financial close and commercial operations by 31st of December 2029. This includes risks to timely project completion, as well as the project's progress towards securing all required approvals, land and connection agreements. Proponents should demonstrate a credible pathway to achieve the COD elected in its bid for the project. And this means non-credible pathways to an earlier COD will not perform as well in this merit criteria compared to a project with clear, credible, and well-evidenced COD that has a later date. So now moving on to MC3. MC3 looks at the capability, contracting delivery model, and financial strategy of the proponent and its management. And it looks at the proponent's key delivery partners, like contractors and suppliers, to successfully deliver the project. MC3 also looks at proponents' track record, their access to development funding, and their capability in raising equity and debt to reach financial close and deliver the project. Then the last merit criteria is MC4. So MC4 is focused on meaningful and lasting social value for local communities and industry. This is expected to include development of the local supply chain, employment and workforce, as well as First Nations participation and shared community benefits. Proponents will be evaluated on their commitments' quality and confidence of delivery. And importantly, this merit criteria has a mandatory returnable schedule to complete as part of the bid submission. And this will become contractually binding if a proponent is successful in this tender. And I just wanted to take a moment to point out some project-specific eligibility requirements as well. So firstly, projects intending to connect to RES infrastructure, they are eligible to bid as long as they meet some specific criteria, and these can be found in the tender guidelines. Next, a project cannot hold both an LTESA and a CISA at the same time. Proponents who are in negotiations with the Australian Government as part of its capacity investment scheme must commit to not executing a CISA if it is awarded an LTESA in this tender round. So now I'm going to pass you on to Lachlan, who will talk you through the MC1 financial value and system benefits deep dive. Thanks.
Thank you, Nikki. As Nikki outlined, MC1 is critical to the bid assessment and it carries a weighting of 49%. The MC1 assessment evaluates financial value and system benefits of a project using a range of benefit and cost metrics. The key metrics for assessment are shown on screen here, and they're expected to be the wholesale market benefit to cost ratio, or BCR, system strength contribution, and system security services. To calculate the financial value metrics, proponents must submit their bid variables and project parameters in the MC1 returnable schedule as part of their bid submission, along with the project documents, and also complete the bid form to support assessment. Components such as wholesale market benefits are modeled using those bid variables and project parameters to best reflect the behaviors of the project. The components are translated into financial value metrics used for MC1 scoring. So now to explore each metric. Wholesale market benefits is shown, wholesale market benefit to cost ratio, BCR, is shown on the right-hand side. It's calculated by dividing wholesale market benefits by net LTESA cost, where wholesale market benefits forecast the reduction in wholesale electricity market costs due to the addition of the project, based on comparing electricity market modeling outcomes both with and without the project. Wholesale market benefits are intended to reward projects with valuable generation profiles to New South Wales customers, and that in describing a valuable generation profile, that's one that's more often aligned with higher wholesale electricity prices and correlated with tight supply demand in New South Wales. So that's possible for wind projects, as an example, and solar hybrids. Also, connecting to a strong network location could enable a project to meaningfully and more meaningfully reduce wholesale market costs. We are also targeting projects that were not operational before July 2025. Net LTESA cost is then shown underneath it, and net LTESA costs are a forecast of cost of the scheme financial vehicle, or SFV, which may be incurred under an LTESA, and that's calculated using the bid variables submitted and project parameters to best reflect the possible operation of the project and its revenues in the market. Both wholesale market benefits and net LTESA cost are modeled across electricity market scenarios, which represent a range of possible and plausible future market outcomes. This includes a low, central, and high scenario, which cover a range of price and volatility outcomes. The second two metrics then are system strength contribution and system security. The system strength contribution intends to reward projects with lower system strength remediation costs. System security services then rewards projects able to contribute to essential system security services that can support the grid. I'll also refer the audience to the MC1 market briefing note that is published on the ASL website, and it provides more detail on characteristics of high-performing bids in previous tender rounds and details on the calculations of both components and metrics for MC1 assessment. With that, thank you all, and I'll pass to Josh.
Thanks, Lockie, and hi everyone. I'm Josh Johnson, ASL's technical lead for social value, and I'm joining you from Gadigal and Wongal country today. Social value is critical to an equitable energy transition, delivering real benefits for industry, local communities, and First Nations peoples. For this round, social value commitments will be assessed holistically using quantitative commitments, qualitative inputs, financial proxies, and discount factors. If you look to the first box on the left, quantitative commitments are captured in mandatory tabs 4 to 8 of the MC4 returnable schedule. These require binding financial commitments in real Australian dollars across the 4 equally weighted domains. If we move to the middle box, the quantitative financial social value commitments provided are then converted into comparable financial units of social value using verified consumer price index adjusted financial proxies. Looking at the final box on the right, qualitative inputs are captured through the new New South Wales Roadmap Tenders Local Needs Analysis, or LNA, in the mandatory tabs 1 to 3. Additional qualitative inputs are also captured through bid form responses and supporting evidence. The LNA plus bid form responses plus supporting evidence collectively informs the quality and confidence discount factors, which are applied across the 4 domains. Discount factors will be applied in assessment and will adjust the estimated social value based on the quality and confidence of commitments. Quality will consider how well commitments respond to local needs and the strength of supporting evidence. Confidence considers the credibility of delivery, strategies, and the proponent's track record. In practice, what this looks like is that strong, targeted, and evidence-based commitments may receive lower discounts, while weaker or generic commitments may receive higher discounts. To achieve high merit in MC4, proponents need to show clear alignment to local needs, supported by credible evidence, delivery strategies, and capability. As I've noted in the first slide, the local needs analysis has been introduced to capture key qualitative inputs. The LNA is intended to ensure social value commitments made by proponents are informed by local needs, stakeholder priorities, and evidence. As a reminder, the LNA inputs inform the confidence and quality discount factors applied and is an essential input into the MC4 assessment. There are three key components across tabs 1 to 3 of the MC4 returnable schedule. First is stakeholder priorities. This provides a summary of key issues and opportunities identified through engagement with communities, industry, and First Nations stakeholders. Second is local needs, translating those priorities into clearly defined needs supported by evidence and data. Third is a theory of change, explaining how social value commitments will deliver outputs, outcomes, and long-term social value. Each tab within the MC4 returnable schedule includes step-by-step guidance, with further information also available in the New South Wales Roadmap Social Value Market Briefing Note and relevant tender guidelines. Additional market education resources not related to tender assessment are also available in the ASL Social Value Toolkit, also on our website. Thank you, and back to you, Jack.
Thanks, Josh. So a few final things before we wrap up the presentation. A recording of this webinar will be uploaded to our website in the coming days. And as I mentioned earlier, all the questions asked in this webinar will have written responses provided to them and be part of that pack. The tender is currently open for bids. If you're new to the process, you are required to create an account in the online portal to register a project and submit a bid. You can access the online portal through the Tender 8 page on our website. All the relevant documentation for Tender Round 8 can also be found on our website. The tender guidelines are the primary source of information and contain all the information necessary to participate in the tender. The formal Q&A process for the tender is currently running. It'll close on the 26th of June at midday. You can also access this Q&A platform through the online portal once you've submitted a registration. And of course, I think the two key timelines to be aware of: registrations close on the 22nd of June at 5 p.m. and bids close on Monday, the 6th of July at 10 a.m. So that concludes our presentation for today. We'll now move on to the Q&A. As I mentioned earlier, those questions that are technical, project specific, or require more time and thought to them than we can just answer off the cuff here, are best suited to go through the formal Q&A process. So if questions of this nature are received and asked, we may take them on notice and we'll publish responses to them through the Q&A instead. So I'll get all the presenters to come on camera and we'll get started. So we'll start with you first, James, which is, how will ASL assess a project's proposed COD in Tender 8?
Thanks, Jack, and hello, everyone. I'm James Hite, the head of New South Wales Commercial. Thank you all for your participation today. So in terms of this one, the first and foremost thing that's really important is that projects should nominate a COD that is credible. So CODs will be looked at in sort of two stages. First will be MC2, where the tender guidelines outline that we're really looking for the elected COD to be set out really clearly with all the risks kind of well thought out and managed and able to reach that COD that is stated and provided in the bid. Additionally, in section 3.4 of the tender guidelines, we have our shortlisting considerations, and in there it outlines the achievement of the development pathway, which we set out in our biennial IIO report, and that will be considered when we do our shortlisting of projects. What that means is a COD before 2030 that helps us get to that minimum generation objective under the EII Act may be viewed more preferably, but only where that delivery pathway has already been assessed as being credible. So a project with a pre-2030 COD, but weaker delivery evidence and not credible, is not expected to perform as well as a project with a later COD, but stronger, more credible pathway.
Thanks, James. And in the interim, we had another one that jumped up to the very top, which will also be for you. And if my memory serves correct, we did outline how we do consider this in the tender guidelines, but I'll throw to you just to cover those key points again. So projects that have won but not signed a CIS agreement can bid into this tender round. Is there any consideration to CIS winners when awarding an LTESA? And maybe I'll also get you beyond the specific question that's asked, just to build out like the requirements for projects that are in that situation as they're outlined in the guidelines.
Thanks, Jack. So the tender guidelines outline in two spots how CIS participants should consider participation in tender round 8. So there's initially in the first section of the tender guidelines and then later on in our tender conditions. And so what both of them go to is that a project cannot hold an LTESA and a CISA at the same time. And proponents who have been awarded a CISA but are yet to execute a CISA are eligible to participate in this tender round. However, if you have executed a CISA, you are ineligible to participate in the tender round. And if you hold either an LTESA or a CISA and want to participate in this tender round, you have to terminate those agreements prior to the bid submission date and time. And that is outlined in the tender guidelines, and definitely recommend you look at particularly section 5.36 of the tender conditions for that being outlined clearly.
Thanks, James. And just like before, we've had another popular one that jumped to the very top as you were answering it, which I'll stick with you for that one. And it's, can you please give some more guidance on what is required to meet the outstanding merit requirement for non-res projects?
Yes, so this is a regulatory requirement on the consumer trustee, and we've outlined how we consider this in the tender guidelines. I've got them in front of me at section 3.4.3, and that kind of goes to where it's not part of a res. We kind of look at four main factors. So there's the long-term financial interest of New South Wales electricity consumers, which is our overarching mandate, how that LTESA being awarded to someone outside of a res contributes to achieving the development pathway and the infrastructure investment objectives. And there's also the non-financial value criteria of the LTESA and the impact of any generation infrastructure under the LTESA on congestion in the New South Wales region. So again, much point proponents towards that section where we do outline the kind of 4 points that we look at in regards to outstanding merit.
Thanks, James. We'll give you a quick bit of reprieve and go to Ross now. So Ross, if a project can bid for both LTESA types, how should it choose between them?
Thanks, Jack, and thanks for the question. Yeah, I think like sort of taking a step back in terms of the journey we've been on with industry with the hybrid generation LTESA this year, I think we've been sort of strong in that there was this need to develop, a dedicated product to support, I guess, behaviour of hybrid generation projects and sort of acting as really providing sort of not just bulk energy, but sort of shaped bulk energy to the market, understanding that that can provide high value to New South Wales consumers. So what we've done, though, is that we've still maintained the drafting within the generation LTESA and the pathways there for you to still submit as an assessed or a non-assessed hybrid under there as well. So I think the reason that we've done all of that is to provide as much flexibility as we possibly can to you to assess what you think the best pathway might be, recognising that There's a myriad of different sort of approaches out there in the market to sort of contracting, and different circumstances may vary. I think would encourage proponents to have a really good look at, I guess, the different provisions when it comes to what are the requirements in terms of either the physical sort of layout or construction of your project for either a hybrid that apply specifically for hybrid generation, and then some of the commercial aspects as well, and to evaluate whether perhaps the dedicated product works for you, or whether it might be the generation LTESA instead.
Thanks, Ross. Lockie, we'll go to you next with this question that's at the top of the list, which is, are proponents permitted to vary the contracted capacity for each financial year under an alternative bid, or does this need to be fixed?
Good question. And so the actual capacity of the project must be the same between the default and alternative bid. But then if we take the question to be the contracted percentage itself and what portion of the project is supported at maximum by the LTESA, then the contracted percentage is nominated upfront in your bid submission and in that LTESA. From time to time and for each financial year or swap period, you can adjust what the nominated percentage is, which is then one of either 25, 50, 75, or 100%. So you have flexibility of bidding a second variable, which gives you additional flexibility for each swap period on an ongoing basis to amend how much of the project's output is contracted to the LTESA. So there's a term that's swap percentage. It's a product of contracted percentage, which is nominated upfront, and a nominated percentage, which is nominated from swap period to swap period, and together they use to encourage flexibility in operation of the project and using the LTESA to support the missing money that exists in the market. The intent is not that that contracted percentage is adjusted year on year. So there's a second variable to look for that. But that contract percentage can differ between default and alternative.
Thanks, Lockie. And I think it would also, because we are getting a lot of questions on the contracts themselves, and we obviously expect to receive more through the tender Q&A process. It'd be remiss of me not to just call out that the team has worked on and recently released a range of product fact sheets, noting that the contracts themselves are very big and detailed. So these product fact sheets are kind of 2-3 pages, which you can find on the tender website, and really just highlight the key need to know aspects of the contract and those different features that provide that flexibility Lockie was talking about. Josh, we'll go to you now with a social value question. So does a standalone local needs analysis assessment document need to be submitted, or is the requirement to only fill out the MC4 returnable schedule?
Thanks, Jack. The local needs analysis consists of tabs 1 to 3 of the MC4 returnable schedule. Proponents must complete all tabs of the mandatory returnable schedule, and there's further information available in the social value market briefing note.
Thanks, Josh. Lockie, I'll go to you next with, how does the settlement differ between the generation LTESA and the hybrid generation LTESA?
Question. I'll repeat your comment, Jack, as well, but the fact sheets do a decent job of it. Hopefully the webinar slide also supports it, but to go through maybe the 3 key differences here between the generation LTESA and hybrid generation, we can imagine it as the generation LTESA relates to the operation of just the generation project, and the co-located storage then acts much more independently. When we move to the hybrid generation LTESA, we imagine the product relates to the operation of the hybrid project together, acting as one unit. So the generation component and storage responding to similar price signals. So we've created a separate product that better suits that kind of behavior and encourages the right incentives for that project type. So settlement differs on the price risk. For the generation LTESA, there's a fixed price, and the swap is a true up or a top up of amounts below and above a fixed price. And effectively, for sent out generation of the generation project, you'll be paid that fixed price. When we move to hybrid generation LTESA, there's a strike price and there's a price risk share, which then means that the project is receiving some amount and also is exposed to some risk on where the price sits against that strike price. Second is settlement, and so the volume for the generation LTESA is based on the generation component only, and it's sent out generation. For the hybrid generation LTESA, it's sent out net exports, looking at the behavioral operation of both generation and storage projects together. Finally, negative price provision would be number 3. Negative price provisions differ between the two products. In the generational LTESA, when floating price is below 0, the floating price will be deemed to have been 0, and it limits the payment, but not any change to the volume. When we swap over to the hybrid generational LTESA, then it's that the volume of the swap actually is set to 0 during those same negative price periods.
Thanks, Lockie. James, we'll go to you with this next one, which is for a hybrid project with a joint LDS and non-assessed hybrid generation bid, what happens if only one of the bids are successful? Are they jointly assessed? And my interpretation of this question is they're talking about submitting 2 different bids, one in 10 to 9, one in 10 to 8, which obviously I'll start with saying they're being run concurrently but separately. I'll hand over to you to build on that, James, and you may interpret the question differently to me as well.
No, I agree, Jack. So in terms of the way that if you have a 8+ hour battery that has a generation facility next to it and you want both of them covered under an LDS LTESA and then separately under a generation LTESA, you will need to effectively split the projects into defining the project as the 2 assets, bidding one into T9 and one into T8 as non-assessed projects. What the non-assessed means is that they're not assessed together. We don't consider the other aspect of the project, and one of them could be awarded without the other being progressed. So proponents need to read through the tender guidelines and consider the way that the project documents interact. If both were awarded, there may need to be some amendments to make sure that the documents all work together with the single connection point. But in that situation, that would occur through our negotiation process after shortlisting.
Thanks, James. Josh, back to you with another question on social value and the local needs analysis in particular. So how exactly will the local needs analysis inform the MC4 score?
Thanks, Jack. The LNA is a key component that will inform the quality and confidence discount factors which are applied in assessment and is a mandatory component of the MC4 returnable schedule. In practice, it provides the structured evidence base that explains how a proponent's social value commitments have been shaped by local context, stakeholder engagement, and data. The qualitative inputs are assessed alongside quantitative commitments. So quality focuses on clear commitments which are aligned to identified local needs, including the strength of engagement and evidence used. Confidence focuses on the feasibility of delivery, including the credibility of strategies and demonstrated track record. So together, this means the local needs analysis does not score independently, but directly influences the overall MC4 outcome by strengthening or discounting the assessed social value of commitments.
Thanks, Josh. So we're at 10:44. I think we'll have time for one more question and then we'll wrap it up. It was going to be for Nikki, but Ross, someone has just liked a question, which I think is more fitting for you, that's jumped to the top. So hopefully you're ready. What are the key changes to the generation LTESA since tender round 4?
Thank you, Jack. Just when I thought I was getting off scot-free without any more questions. No, thanks for the question. Yeah, obviously it's been a little while whilst the CIS tenders have been going since we've done a generation LTESA. So we've had a really sort of comprehensive look at the LTESA for this round and aligned it with, I guess, some of the positions in our other products and made sure that, I guess some other things that have moved where we've tried to do our best to support projects in becoming bankable, moved across what we have. So I guess some specific examples, I guess, to talk to would be the fact that we now have, instead of sort of 2-year options, we've got 1-year options to provide as much flexibility as we can to proponents. I'd also note that the repayment mechanism has changed and is more favourable for operators, as well as we've had a look at the early termination amount mechanism as well, which we also see as being more favourable. And hopefully all of that together helps to drive more competitive bidding. I should note, rather than sort of going through the long list of changes now, we have also provided a marked up version of the LTESA against the last tender round for you all, which hopefully provides I guess, an easy way to determine what's changed. And as you said, Jack, we've recently released some fact sheets as well, which talk to some of the key features of the latest docs.
Thanks, Ross. And so there's just two questions that I've seen pop in that I'll quickly answer to wrap us up. The first is on when we can expect the tender to wrap up and the outcomes to be announced. The answer to that is Q4. We don't give a specific date in Q4 because obviously when we get into that tail end of the tender with negotiations, contract executions, etc., the dates can be a little bit fluid, but we are expecting Q4. And the other one was, will there be a recording of this webinar? And so the answer to that is yes, a recording of this webinar and written responses to all the questions we've received, not just the questions that we've answered here. There are far more questions coming in way quicker than we can answer them, but we'll take them all. We'll provide written responses to them alongside the webinar recording. We'll publish that on our website and we'll send out an email to everyone who attended or registered for today's webinar so that they know that they're now available. And finally, if you have a moment to spare, we would appreciate if you could scan the QR code on the screen now just to provide some quick feedback on today's webinar. There's a few questions, should only take a minute or two. We obviously find that feedback really valuable in making sure that we can continue to make these webinars better and better and ensure that we are providing the right sort of targeted, useful, helpful information for all proponents. So with that, a massive thank you to everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. And as I said, we'll obviously share a recording and written answers to all the questions we've received. We look forward to receiving your bids. Thank you.